We are now live
Oh,
on Vimeo,
right on.
Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. So thank you very much for joining us. This is a very special seminar with Dr. Jinxi Caddel beaming in to the Health City Tattoo Festival from Oregon. And
Aw,
well, thanks again for joining us, Jinxi, and take it
thank
away.
you. Thank you so much. And thank you, everybody who's here. I appreciate your support so much. And I'm so super thrilled and honored to be asked by Health City and Reinventing the Tattoo to get to talk to you today about a lot of things that I use in my daily life and my work. Um, and just kind of crafted it to apply to my beloved tattoo and art community. So I guess I'll just start by introducing myself. If you don't know me, my name is Jinxi Caddel, and I have been lucky enough to be a part of the tattoo and art world for about 3 decades now. Shows my age. But I've been a tattoo collector for a long time, and I have been able to work as a writer and an editor for many magazines and websites and publishing companies throughout the years. And then about, let's see, in 2010, my husband Steve and I started Out of Step Books. We make art and tattoo books. So many of you may have been a part of our books or perhaps own them in your art library. We've made 27 books to date, and we are just about to send our 28th title off to print. So we are so grateful for getting to do this for such a long time and be so inspired by the artists who are part of our projects. And then we also own Out of Step Tattoo and Gallery. It's a tattoo shop in downtown Eugene, Oregon. And we feel so lucky to get to work with 5 super rad tattoo artists every day who inspire us. And then in the front of our space, we have a little gallery with paintings and prints and pins and shirts and stickers and all kinds of fun stuff. So that's some of the work that I have done in the tattoo world. And then a handful of years ago, I decided that it was time to go back to grad school. And I first got my master's degree in sports psychology. And then I went on to get my doctorate degree in clinical psychology. And I have been able to work in many different realms in the mental health world. I've worked as a clinician for a nonprofit clinic, helping patients with SPMIs or severe and persistent mental illnesses. I've worked as in the sports psychology world with athletes. I also have a CADC license, so I'm a certified alcohol and drug counselor. So I've helped people who are in recovery. I was a school-based mental health therapist in both a high school and a middle school. And now I am so stoked and loving having a private practice. It's called Black Sheep Therapy. And I help people every day with some of the challenges in their lives. And that's kind of where all of this came about, using the things that I help my clients with and the techniques that we work on every day to alleviate some of the issues that they're having, made me think that it would be super cool if I could craft that to apply to artists who are where my heart is. So that's where this seminar came about. And I've tweaked and added a couple of things for you today. So I hope that it can help you in many ways in your work. So we will get started. And the first thing that I just kind of like to start out asking is for you to just think of these 3 questions to yourself. So when you wake up every day, Do you feel like you have a sense of purpose? Are you happy with the work that you're doing? And do you really feel like you are living your life to the fullest? Well, there's a lot of different aspects to well-being, of course, but these are just some things I always like to kind of start with just to get things going and see where we're at and see what we need to work on. And as I said, there are many types of well-being. So for this morning, I've broken them down just to start with 4 types. So we have emotional well-being, social well-being, workplace well-being, and societal well-being. So when we are talking about emotional well-being, we're basically looking at like, how well do you handle stressors when they happen in your life? And how resilient are you when difficult things happen to you? And do you feel like you are eliciting emotions that are leading to good feelings and behaviors in your life? When we're looking at social well-being, this is looking at like, how well do we communicate with the people around us? And are we developing meaningful relationships in our life? And how strong of a support network and system do we have when we need people to support us? When we're looking at workplace well-being, we're basically looking at that place where you work, the environment where you create. Is this place allowing you to work towards that purpose and your goals? Is it a safe place where you feel like you can be yourself and work to that optimal level? And then when we are talking about societal well-being, we're basically looking at the community, the environment that we're a part of. And are we helping that community to be better or stronger in some way? And I like to think that oh, sorry if I lost you. I like to think that many of you are already very good at societal well-being, simply because you are here today. You're at a place, an event that's all about making your community and your craft better and stronger in some way. So just really quick, I want to hop to this other concept because it's going to come up quite often today. I use it a lot in my work and you're going to hear me refer to it a lot. So I just want to introduce you, in case you aren't familiar yet with it, to the cognitive triangle. So the cognitive triangle was developed for this certain type of therapy known as cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT. And basically what the cognitive triangle tells us is that our thoughts and our emotions and our actions and behaviors are all very closely connected. In fact, they really tend to play off of one another. So let's say you have a positive thought, you're having a positive self-talk, and maybe you say like, oh, right on, I'm so stoked with how that tattoo came out. Or I'm really proud of myself for walking into that room and talking to somebody new that I hadn't met before. So what happens when you have that positive thought, the positive self-talk? Well, it usually leads to positive emotions and feelings where you're probably feeling happy or confident or proud in some way. And subsequently, those positive feelings are probably going to lead to actions and behaviors that are also positive, where we're working more closely toward our optimal level. And when we're doing that, it leads us back up to having that positive self-talk, good thoughts about who we are. But let's look at it from the other point of view. Let's say we have a negative thought about ourselves. And we say like, oh man, I'm so stupid. I can't believe I did that. Or like, I'll just never be as good at that as she is. Well, when we have those negative thoughts and self-talk, oftentimes that leads to emotions and feelings that are also probably not great. We might be disappointed or frustrated or sad. And when that happens, subsequently leads to actions and behaviors that are also not our best. We're not working at that optimal level that we're capable of. And when that happens, it leads back to more thoughts that are probably not the best. So as you can see with the cognitive triangle, there's no starting point, no stopping point. This can be a super good thing, right? Because if we're having positive loop around that triangle, that's an awesome thing because everything feeds each other and we're working great and feeling great. But if we are on that negative loop around the triangle, this can be super dangerous. And this is where we oftentimes see people spiral, because it doesn't take many times around that triangle to really start spiraling and developing into things that we might need to be more concerned about. So the key with the cognitive triangle is really learning how to become aware of how these things all work together so that we can get better at recognizing when we need to hop in there and reroute those thoughts into something positive that keeps us on this good loop around the triangle. Okay, so thanks for letting me talk about that because I'm going to use it again quite often. But now we're going to go right back to well-being again. And in our lives, there are lots of little monsters that love to sneak in and threaten our sense of well-being. We're going to talk about lots of them today, but the one I'd like to start with is one that all of us are probably pretty familiar with, and that is anxiety. Oh man, so anxiety. Well, it is really just a part of the human condition, and honestly, it's sometimes a little bit misunderstood. So basically, when you are feeling anxiety, you are having some kind of a fear or an apprehension about something that's coming in the future, something that you're really worried about. And we all spend a lot of time every day experiencing this because there's always things coming up that we get worried and fearful about. But I'm here today to remind you that when you are experiencing anxiety, you are honestly just having this completely natural and normal reaction to some kind of stressor in your life. We've all been conditioned to feel like when anxiety hits, that something is like really wrong with us. But really, anxiety is just this beautiful triumph, really, of human evolution, because it gives us this ability to think about uncertain things that are coming in our future and be able to prepare for them. The key, though, with anxiety is what we do with it. What do we do when we feel it? Do we keep anxiety at this natural, normal reaction to stress? Or is it something that spirals and becomes dangerous? Maybe to the point where we have to think about an anxiety disorder. So if you think back to the cognitive triangle, we see how those things play off of each other. And this is the key with anxiety, is that we want to learn how to recognize it, acknowledge it, and then step in with the tips and the tricks that we can learn to keep it as a natural, normal reaction to stress. So when we experience anxiety, there's oftentimes some really common little defense tactics that we notice creep in. So a lot of times we see denial when we feel anxiety. And this really goes back to that idea of being conditioned, that it is just this terrible thing. We don't want to feel that way. We don't want to think that something's wrong with us. Same thing with avoidance. This is very closely related to denial, but it can be dangerous because we aren't thinking, aren't acknowledging that shift in our emotions. And when that happens, that can so easily lead to those spiraling thoughts and behaviors, just like we talked about with the cognitive triangle. Also, a lot of times when we're feeling anxiety creep in, we get upset and take it out on other people. And this is known as displacement. And this is also this other little tricky little shift that gets us to avoid acknowledging it and working through it in a positive, proactive way. Again, I'd like to remind you that there really are some positive aspects to anxiety, believe it or not. First, anxiety helps to keep us motivated. What I mean by this is, say you have a tattoo appointment coming up that you're not quite ready for. Well, anxiety is what kicks in and tells us that we need to sit down and look up some reference photos, or start drawing your stencil or create your design. Anxiety also protects us from harm because it's anxiety that kicks in and tells us when we're in a dangerous situation. And anxiety really helps to offer perspective in our lives. And I know that seems weird, but it's really, it's not those everyday, boring, mundane little moments of our life that we get anxious about, right? It's the things that really matter to us, that we really care about. And so anxiety helps us to keep that perspective and remember what matters, what we need to be worrying about. Now, in addition to these everyday little stressors and feelings of anxiety that we experience, I also want to talk about creative anxiety, because in a room full of artists, where creativity is basically the crux of your livelihood, this is a really important thing to tackle, right? So again, creative anxiety will again be some type of fear or apprehension that you're having, somehow related to your work, to what you're producing. This might be a fear of not creating what our clients want from us. Maybe it's a fear of not measuring up in the art world. This can be something very easy to do with social media presence, which we will talk about quite a bit in a little bit. It might be a fear of rejection or criticism in some way. Or it could be a fear of not measuring up to our own potential, what we think and know that we are capable of. The first thing that I like to do when I ask people to tackle anxiety is to first just get really good at acknowledging its presence. Let yourself remember that it is a natural, normal reaction to stress. It's okay. It means you're doing something right. And we want to avoid some of those defense tactics that creep in, like denial. So there can be something really powerful about just being like, man, I'm learning how to recognize, and I know this is coming on. Now, what am I going to do with what I'm feeling? Am I going to stop this negative route around the cognitive triangle, or am I going to let it spiral and get out of control? So acknowledging it can just be this super simple first easy thing that we can get really good at doing to help us through the next steps. Next, after you learn how to recognize and acknowledge anxiety, then I like to ask my clients to get really good at incorporating breathing techniques into their world and into their life. So just get good at taking a good inhale and exhale. Really pay attention to the way that your body calms down and how breathing helps you to center. Sometimes I like to tell clients to Inhale like you're walking into this kitchen where this delicious cake is baking. So you inhale real big. And then exhale like you're blowing out the candles on a birthday cake. Some people just like to do. Oh man, I'm so sorry if my thing did my thing disconnect again? I'm sorry. Right in the middle of breathing. Nice, easy inhales, exhales. And as you get better and better at doing this breathing work, I do like to introduce this other type of breathing known as 4 square breathing. So this video you can find on YouTube if you just search for 4 square breathing. It's a little bit more advanced breathing technique, but I'd like to show you today because I feel like it's really important to try to work up to these things so that our body can be ready to implement them when we start feeling those higher levels of anxiety. So the way that 4 square breathing works is we first do an inhale for a count of 4. We're going to hold that air in our lungs for a count of 4. Exhale for a count of 4. And then hold our lungs empty for a count of 4. So I'm going to just show you a quick round of it with this video, and then maybe we can just practice just like a minute of it. This video is 3 minutes long, but we'll just do a little sample so you can kind of get the gist of it. And then if you want to look this up and practice it yourself, I highly recommend it. It's super good at helping to bring us down and center ourselves. So here we go. Going to inhale, hold that air in your lungs, exhale, and then hold your lungs empty. So let's try it together. We'll go one more time. Yay, right on. Thank you for doing it with me. That was only a minute. This video is 3 minutes long, and it's just this really great way of getting your body accustomed to know how to kick in when you need to. And breathing is such an excellent, awesome tool because first, it's always free. We always have it with us. We can do it inconspicuously. People don't even need to know that you're doing it. Breathing instantly sends this extra oxygen to our parasympathetic nervous system. It helps to regulate our heartbeat and lower that heartbeat so that we can de-escalate the anxiety. Our attention is no longer on those feelings of anxiety because now we're focusing on our breathing. And this is just this way to immediately help your brain to slow down, give you better clarity. And obviously breathing is not a fix-all, right? It's not going to end anxiety, but it's just this really helpful strategy when you're in that moment and feel yourself escalating to bring yourself back down and give yourself the time that you need to start working through the next steps that we're going to learn how to do. So after we've acknowledged, done a little breathing, then we are going to mentally decide how we're going to approach this feeling of anxiety. And this is where we think back to that cognitive triangle. What kind of a route are we going to make around it? Also, please remind yourself that you are in control. You have the power to get through this feeling. And I know that you do, because here you are in this moment experiencing anxiety, which means that probably somewhere in your past, you've also had a very high stress moment and you survived and you made it through to where we are right now. I also really like to ask my clients to measure their level of anxiety on a scale of 1 to 10. So make your 10 like the highest amount of anxiety that you've ever felt in your life. That's your 10. And then step back and really assess your situation. Where are you on that scale? Maybe you're at a 4. Maybe you're at a 7. Maybe you really are at a 10. But there's something really awesome and powerful about just stepping back and assessing it from this whole different perspective that sometimes helps us to realize what we're really dealing with. And it also really helps us to ask ourselves, are we catastrophizing this stressor? Or is it worse than we think that it is? And what I mean by catastrophizing is this irrational thought or belief that we have that something is so much worse than it actually is. And catastrophizing is very easy to do, because when we start feeling that way, we like to tell ourselves like, man, this is so bad, I can't deal with this. But what catastrophizing does is it leads to instant feelings of distress. It kicks in that negative self-talk and it starts us on that negative loop around the cognitive triangle. And this leads to feelings of hopelessness, which, as we know, can start that spiral really quickly. So the key when we are feeling this way is that we want to find ways to calm our emotions, calm our thoughts to this tolerable level so that we can start taking proactive steps and start making really good choices as to how we're going to work through what we're feeling. And that's what I'm going to talk about next. I'm going to share with you a bunch of little techniques that I use with my clients. Everybody's different, so just listen to them, check them out. You know what works best for you and what you know would be easy to implement in your life. So just listen to them and kind of pick and choose what you think you might be able to take and put into your toolkit. So the first one I want to start with is one of my favorites, and it is using centering objects. So when I'm working with clients in my office, I like to keep this little array, I'm going to show you, of little rocks, like little gems like this, sometimes crystals or seashells. I just like to keep them on the table next to them so that if they start getting elevated and stressed, they can reach for these centering objects. And what we like to use centering objects for is to make this association with understanding that we are feeling a little unregulated, and we want to bring ourselves down. And the reason why things like this can be very effective is a lot of us, especially artists, right, are very visual. So just taking the time to really look at the shape, look at the color, check out the different veins and details that are running through each piece. Visual sensory experience can be very grounding for some people. Also, some people really react to the sense of touch. So sometimes things with ridges, sometimes the smooth surface can be very relaxing and centering for people. We always want to find ways that our senses can help us to bring ourselves down. So centering objects like these rocks or stones or seashells, or sometimes people like to wear a necklace, a charm, a pendant, something that you can reach for easily, that's very inconspicuous. Nobody even has to know you're doing it. Something that we can teach ourselves is this association between, okay, I'm feeling amped up, I'm going to reach for something that I know will help to bring me down and calm me. Usually we like these things to be small, something you can keep in your pocket or keep on your station or on your desk or in the console of your car, just something you know is your association with bringing yourself back down. So centering objects are a really fun one and something that I find a lot of my clients really react well to. Next, I want to remind you to just check in with your body, because I know this seems like super simple and almost too easy, but man, there's something very powerful about just making sure that our foundational needs are met. So did I have breakfast this morning? Am I dehydrated? How much sleep did I get last night? Is this adding to my level of anxiety? And this goes to the principle of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So Abraham Maslow was a psychologist in the 1940s. He developed this idea of this hierarchy of needs. And basically he says that people are motivated by these 5 categories of needs. At the very top, we're looking at self-actualization, like really understanding our purpose and having this true sense of actualization. But in order to get to that top of the pyramid, we have got to first look at these very, very basic foundational needs, our physiological needs. Are we eating, getting enough hydration, sleep? These basic foundational needs we have got to fulfill first if we even want to dream of working at higher level needs, things like psychological needs, of which anxiety falls under, right? So sometimes just checking in and asking yourself where you're at with this can be really effective. Obviously not a fix-all, but very important to remember. Next, I am a huge believer in the power of music. Obviously, this is because we all have very special, intense connections to music. We know what can make us feel energized. We know what can make us feel calm and centered. So sometimes it's very helpful to create a playlist, an anxiety playlist, basically, that you know that you can turn to and listen to if you need to feel more centered. Also, huge advocate of walking. I am so sorry, I keep losing you, dang it, of walking away. So what I mean by this is we like to sometimes remind ourselves that wherever that origin of anxiety started, wherever you started feeling that stressor kick in, we like to remove ourselves from that environment because a lot of times those associations can be really strong and it can cause us to not be able to work through those steps. So sometimes it might mean just getting up from your station, taking a walk around your shop, taking a walk around your house, maybe taking a little walk down the street. Even just going in the other room sometimes can make a world of difference. Removing yourself from that environment where the stressor started can really do some wonderful things to help you to move forward. Next, some people find it very effective to write down their fears, their anxieties, the things that they're feeling, because sometimes you see this whole new perspective when you take the time to translate it to paper and see it written down. So writing down things can be helpful for some people. Obviously, never underestimate the power of a good downward dog, right? Or some nice easy stretching, just getting yourself moving can help to ground you and help you to feel more centered again. As you've probably noticed, one of the big things that we like to use is to really focus in on our senses, because our sensory experiences can help us to ground and center and really de-escalate that anxiety. And the sensory experiences are different for everybody. So find the one that you know works for you. If you know that smell helps you, keep things like candles, incense, oils, maybe smells from outside, fresh cut grass or flowers or fruit. Find the smells and scents that you know help to calm you. If it's sight, I mean, this can be as easy as just being around the people that we love, pets, artwork. Of course, we're so lucky to be surrounded by amazing artwork when you're artists. Photos, videos. We live in a time where there's tons of satisfying videos on social media. So find the types of visual experiences that you know help to ground you. If it's touch, this can be a very powerful sense. I actually have a client who loves to order these little swatches of fabric, and she keeps them in her pocket and finds that the different textures and softness and things that she really focuses on can be a really good grounding technique for her. Same with the centering objects that we talked about earlier. If it's hearing, we already talked about music, but maybe it's tranquil sounds. You know, there's tons of apps now that help give us like white noise, fire crackling, rain, water running, all those cool things. Maybe ASMR, sometimes that really works for some people. Use the things that you know help you to feel more calm. And then taste, again, can be a very powerful scent to use. That's because we have these specific regions on our taste buds that deliver all kinds of sensations and help us to center. So some people like to keep like hard candy or gum or lollipops, things like that, that they can just grab really easily. Sometimes fizzy drinks or tea, whatever it is that you know can really help you to ground. And I do want to make one little caveat with taste is if we are dealing with some type of an eating disorder, we do usually like to avoid using taste as a grounding technique, just because it can get a little convoluted with some other triggers and associations. So if you do suffer from an eating disorder, maybe try to focus on the other four instead. And then one trick that I personally like to use often is one that's fun because it incorporates 3 different senses and sometimes 4 if you're really careful. So this is the lathery soap mindfulness technique. So basically just get a bar of soap that you love or some really good liquid soap and get really good at lathering it. As you're rubbing it in your hands, pay attention to the bubbles, the shapes, the sizes, how they move every time you move your hands. Get up there and really visually take it in. Use the smells of that scent to take in another scent. And then obviously the touch of rubbing the bar of soap in your hands can be our 3rd scent. And if you're really careful, even you can hear like the little lathery bubbles all bubbling up for hearing too. But that's a really fun one that can really get you like in that mindfulness moment. And we're going to talk about much more mindfulness in just a little bit. And one more little trick when it comes to our sensory experiences is this thing called the 3-3-3 rule. So with the 3-3-3 rule, we are going to focus on vision, hearing, and touch. So basically, you're going to go around your room and just find 3 things that you can see. So might be the water bottle on your desk, a pillow on your couch, your dog sitting in the corner. You're just going to take each object and really take a moment to take in all it has to offer. Look at the shape, look at the color, read things that are on it, pay attention to each object. Next, we're going to use 3 hearing, 3 things that we hear. So just close your eyes, listen to, maybe it'll be like the hum of your refrigerator, or it could be your cat purring, or the sound of a car starting outside. We're going to listen to 3 different things. And then the third one is touch. So might be like pick up a pen on your desk, or a pillow on your couch, or maybe the shirt or sweater you're wearing. And just really pay attention to the way that it feels. Take a few moments to really soak in each one of those things that you're touching. And then step back and do that assessment again. Where are we at on that scale? Do we need to do another round of 3-3-3? Do we need to tap back into some other techniques that are in our toolbox? Assess where you're at and give yourself, celebrate any progress that you've made if you've alleviated some of that anxiety. The key with all of these things that we used in order to help to alleviate the feelings of anxiety that we're having is just getting really good at recognizing when we're on one of those negative loops around the cognitive triangle. And when we find ourselves there, learning how to reroute those negative thoughts into empowering self-talk. And what I mean by self-talk is probably exactly what you think it is. It's just this internal monologue that we have with ourselves all day long. It's the things that we think to ourselves, the things that we say to ourselves. And this really powerful thing happens when we are able to turn that negative self-talk into positive self-talk. We're using this awesome tool called cognitive restructuring. And that is when we are discovering, recognizing, really getting good at noticing when that negative self-talk is creeping in and rerouting it into that positive loop around the triangle. The reason why cognitive restructuring is so super awesome and powerful is that we have these circuits in our brain that create these neural pathways. And I kind of like to think of the neural pathways as like this really well-crafted path. When you're on a hike and you find this path that's super easy to follow, you know exactly where you're going. Well, these are what our neural pathways are like in our brain. And the habits that we use the most often, the things that we implement into our lives the most, are going to be the neural pathway that our brain likes to go to first. So if we are used to using negative self-talk a lot, the neural pathway it goes to is that negative self-talk. So when we are implementing cognitive restructuring and we're learning how to reroute those neural pathways, it's going to be hard at first. It's not an easy thing. It's going to be like hacking through the brush and making your way through the trees and clearing away the weeds, because you're implementing this whole new path. You've got to build this whole new path for your brain. And if you think about how long it takes you to craft the pathways, the neural pathways that we already have, of course, it's going to take some time to reroute them, right? But as we learn how to do it, as we get better at practicing and implementing it into our daily lives, slowly these new habits, these new thought patterns do start to change. And pretty soon, if you're start trying to change your negative self-talk into positive self-talk, the more you do it, the more easily your brain's going to be like, that's the pathway that now I need to go down. So now we are going to shift to another little monster that loves to creep in and threaten our sense of well-being, and that is creative block and burnout. Now, again, when I'm talking to a room full of artists, chances are you have probably experienced this many times in your career. And if you haven't yet, you probably will. When I think of creativity, I really like to think of it as this well that we are continually taking from. So every time you start a new tattoo, you sit down and start making a sketch or a painting. Every time you're doing a new project, you're dipping that bucket down into the well and pulling up the creativity that you need to do that project. And ideally, every time we take from the well, we should be replenishing the well, right? But as life goes, you're busy artists, you've got lots of projects to work on, and it's inevitable that one of these days you're going to put that bucket. Oh man, I am so sorry. It keeps happening. You're going to put that bucket down there and pull up the bucket to tap into your creativity. And that is when you're going to notice that your creative energy was pushed to the full capacity that day. This happens often because you're busy. You're using that well all the time, right? And when this happens, we often see some things creep in. So oftentimes you might feel like you just dread starting a new project. When you do, you might not feel as passionate about the work that you're doing. You might be super critical of the work that you're putting out there. It might be this struggle just to get it done. You might even be experiencing physical signs of stress, like you might be getting headaches more often, stomach aches, pain in your shoulders, holding tension in different areas. You might just be getting physically sick more often. And we oftentimes see a sense of detachment in other areas of your life. And this makes sense, right? Because if creating is your livelihood and that's you're feeling burned out and tapped out, of course, that's going to carry over into other aspects of your life. So the thing to do when we are experiencing this block or burnout, again, just like we talked about with anxiety, the first thing to do is just to acknowledge it. It's okay. Remind yourself the reason you're feeling this way is because you're just working really hard. You're using all the creativity you've got. Don't let these feelings of burnout or block be the cause for that negative self-talk that puts us on that route that we don't want to be on. It's really important to remind yourself that creative burnout, it's not this fatality. You're going to get over it. It's just as injury, just like we experience in sports. Perhaps you've been forgetting to stretch other creative muscles. Maybe you've been overworking other areas and haven't tapped into the areas that you are needing to use at that time. And it's felt like you're weakening other areas, but it's okay because we can get back on track. Just remember, we haven't dried up that creative well. We've just been overworking it in other areas. So again, like I talked about with anxiety, the first thing I like to remind people to do is sometimes it just really helps to step away. Step away from that spot where you're feeling blocked and you're feeling frustrated. Take a walk outside your shop. Take your pet for a walk. Get outside and remember that there's other ways to inspire that creativity. Again, just like we talked about with anxiety, maybe you need to create a creative playlist. You know, the music that helps you to feel energized and passionate and creative. Use that to your benefit. Also, this might be a great time to get inspired by art. Maybe visit an art museum, go to an art gallery, take the afternoon to appreciate street art, or go to another tattoo shop. And while you're there, talk to other artists. This is something I'm going to bring up often because I know how powerful it can be to just let other people know what you're experiencing. Sometimes knowing that you're not alone, knowing that you have that camaraderie and understanding, and I can assure you that other people are probably feeling exactly what you are or have at some point. And sometimes that can be such an inspiration for getting you or both of you back on track. Also, might be a good time to just take your work somewhere else. Maybe take your sketchbook to the park for the afternoon. Get in this new environment that fills you with this new sense of creativity. I have a client who really loves to go to the library when she's feeling blocked or frustrated. She finds that there's something just really nice about the anonymity, the solace, the quiet that like really helps to inspire her. And that leads me to this really fun story I'd like to share with you about the great Roald Dahl. So many of you may be familiar with the literary treasures that he has given us, like Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, James and the Giant Peach, Matilda, the Witches, such a brilliant writer. So Roald is British, and he, on his property in England where he lived, he had a writing hut, to what he called his writing hut. And this is where he would go to write all of his stories. Well, as the story goes, Roald had been down there in the writing hut for a few days, feeling very frustrated and having writer's block. So he decided to walk out onto his property where he had lots of beautiful fruit trees, and he sat down underneath an apple tree. And after he sat down, this apple fell right next to him. So he picked up the apple and he held it in his hand and really studied it and looked at it. And then he started thinking to himself, how funny would it be if this apple just kept growing and growing and growing to the point where I couldn't even hold it in my hands anymore. And right then, in that moment, was the catalyst for his idea of his amazing book, James and the Giant Peach. So this is just this fun little way to remind you that sometimes learning how to plant these new idea seeds, taking yourself outside of that environment that is causing you that frustration, can be so, so big and powerful. Another really great idea for overcoming creative block can be taking a shower. I know this seems silly, but how many of you have experienced that moment when you're in the shower and you're just like, have all kinds of really great ideas? Well, this happens for a couple different reasons. So first, we tend to have increased dopamine flow when we're in the shower. So increased dopamine flow comes from these triggers that make us feel relaxed. And when we have a relaxed state of mind, we are much more likely to turn our attention inward and make more insightful connections. So activities that our brain perceives as relaxing, things like taking a warm shower, just mindlessly doodling on a pad of paper, or even like driving home from work. You know how sometimes you drive home and you get there and you're like, I don't even know how I got here, because you're just so used to that route that you take that your brain just does it automatically. Well, these are all activities our brain perceives as more relaxing. And when we have this greater likelihood of having really great ideas because of that increased state of dopamine flow. The other cool thing that happens when we're taking a shower is this thing called the incubation period. So the incubation period happens when we're not consciously thinking about a problem. And that's because our subconscious mind, it works so hard all day long to solve as many little problems as possible. But there's something that happens when we let our mind wander and we allow those ideas from our subconscious mind to surface and plant themselves into our conscious mind. And it allows for these new thoughts and chances for creativity to thrive. So if you're so inclined, sometimes taking a shower can really trigger and spark all kinds of new creative outlets. And that leads me to another story I'd like to share with you about Stephen King. As many of you probably know, he is a voracious reader himself, and a very dedicated and hardworking writer. And when he finishes a book, he likes to take that completed book, put it on his desk, and leave it there for 6 whole weeks. This thing that he calls the recuperation time. And the reason he does this is he says that when you write a book, you spend day after day scanning and identifying the trees. But when you're done, you need to step back and look at the forest. So obviously, I'm not saying put your work away for 6 weeks, but there's something so beautiful about this idea, because we oftentimes, especially with artwork and tattooing, you get so fixated on really the details, the intricacy of the work that you're doing, identifying those trees. And there can be something so big about stepping back and just having this whole different perspective and seeing things from this whole different point of view that can really help to spark that sense of creativity again. So just a real quick recap with this little part. Remember that when you're feeling blocked, it is just a temporary hurdle. We can use some of these techniques to get through it and start filling that well up again. Please get good at talking to other artists around you. Share your experience in person, on social media, even if you need to write messages or texts. There's something so powerful about that sense of camaraderie, remembering that you're not alone, helping each other to find those little tricks to help you feel inspired again. And understand that these are the challenges of success. And what I mean by that is, you know, the reason you're feeling this way is because you work so hard. You tap into that well so often that you've just dried it out for a temporary time. And again, listen to your body, tap into things like your food, your sleep, your hydration. Go back to that hierarchy of needs and make sure that you are fulfilling those basic physiological needs so that you can start to pay attention to these higher level needs, of which creativity and creating art are a part of. Take one little sip. Okay. So the next thing we're going to talk about is imposter syndrome. So many of you may be familiar with what imposter syndrome is, but if you're not, let's just do a really quick recap. So basically, if you are experiencing imposter syndrome, you are kind of having this feeling, this experience where you don't really think you belong where you're at. You think that at any moment you're going to be found out, and maybe you shouldn't be at darn it, sorry again. So you shouldn't be at that level or that place of success that you're at already. A lot of times you might feel like you just got there out of sheer luck or by chance. And when we're looking at imposter syndrome, we oftentimes see quite a few things that tend to creep in. So a lot of times when people feel this way, they're going to be attributing their success and where they're at to external factors and not the actual skills and abilities that they have. So they might feel like they only got that job or that spot at that shop because nobody else applied. You're not really looking at how successful and capable you really are. You might see people agonizing over really small, tiny mistakes and really just dwelling on every little thing that they do wrong. You might feel this fear that you aren't living up to expectations of you. And remember back to when we talked about at the beginning with creative anxiety, this is something that really creeps in with that. Are we living up to the expectations of our clients and of ourselves? We find that people are very sensitive to criticism. And this is because they believe that if anyone gives them criticism, even constructive criticism, that it might be a way that might validate the idea that they don't belong where they are, that they shouldn't be there. A lot of times we see big overachievers, people who always go the extra mile, always do extra work to get ahead because they think if they don't, people are going to find out that they don't belong where they're at. And we oftentimes see really, really big, challenging goals set and then feeling super disappointed when you fall short. Now, there's a couple different types of players that come into the idea of imposter syndrome. So the first one that we oftentimes see is the perfectionist. And this is a person who's just never satisfied. They always feel like their work could be better in some little way. Rather than focusing on the strengths and the things that they're really good at, they tend to look and fixate on those little flaws or mistakes. And obviously, this leads to a great deal of self-pressure and really high levels of anxiety. We also have the superhero. Now, this is someone who feels compelled to just always be pushing themselves to the limit, though no amount of work is ever good enough for the superhero. Next, we have the expert. And this is someone who's just always trying to learn more, never satisfied with their level of understanding. And this is actually a good thing, right? Because we always want to be learning more and getting better. But the tricky thing with this one is oftentimes they're really underestimating their abilities, their skills. Even though they're skilled enough, they don't feel like they are. And we've got the natural genius. And this is, again, the person who sets really high goals. And then when they can't accomplish them that first time out, they just feel crushed. And we've got the soloist. And this is the person who tends to prefer to work alone. They feel like all of their self-worth is tied up in how much they produce. And they often reject offers of assistance because they feel like if they do, this will just prove that they shouldn't be where they're at. Now, obviously, feeling the sense of imposter syndrome can lead to really high levels of anxiety, right? Because like we think back to that cognitive triangle, if we're on a loop where we're having that negative self-talk and not feeling like we're good enough to belong where we're at, it's going to lead to negative emotions and feelings and then behaviors, and it's going to keep you in this really vicious cycle. We don't want to get caught in that trap where we're finding ourselves on that negative loop around the triangle. So how do we cope with imposter syndrome? Well, I'm going to share a couple little tricks with you. The first one is, again, to really get good at sharing your feelings with other people. Get comfortable with talking to other artists about how you're feeling. I can assure you that other people have felt the same way that you do, or maybe are in that moment. This is so important because those irrational thoughts, those irrational beliefs that we have, they're just compounded. They get internalized. They grow when they're not talked about and when they're hidden. And that imposter syndrome is only going to get bigger and bigger and become a gigantic monster if we don't learn how to get it out. You just have this much higher likelihood of unraveling those irrational thoughts and rerouting yourself on that triangle when you're able to talk through it with somebody else. And honestly, this is why therapy works so well for people, because when you're used to trapping things inside and internalizing it, there's something huge about letting it out into the world that helps you to start getting on that track to rerouting those thoughts and feelings. Next, it can be a really great time to focus on others. And I know this might sound counterintuitive, but trying to help other people can be so beneficial in gaining that strength for yourself. So if you see someone who seems awkward or alone, bring them into the group. Let them know that they belong there. And as you practice those skills and help other people, you will find that your confidence levels and abilities also grow. Also, it's a really good time to assess your abilities. Take note of the accomplishments you have. Pay attention to how skilled you really are. This goes back to having that internal dialogue. Sometimes I tell people, pull out some of your old tattoos and compare them to what you're doing now. Look at the progress you've made and ask yourself, is this inner self-talk, this inner dialogue I'm having, is it really matching up with how I feel about being an imposter and not being where I know that I should be? Next step is something that I like to remind people with absolutely everything we ever work on in therapy or with any of these things, is please, please be okay with taking baby steps. This is so important because if you think about how long it took you to get to the feelings you're having right now, of course, when we're trying to reroute those neural pathways, it's going to take a lot of time. We've got to be okay with those little baby steps. And another thing I like to remind people is always celebrate your accomplishments. Even when you think something's just a little amount of progress, it's so important to take it into consideration, celebrate it, and realize that these little baby steps are what's building on making everything bigger and to get you to the point that you're working towards. And again, I hope you're not getting tired of this, but use that cognitive restructuring. Question your thoughts, question your self-talk. Where are you on that cognitive triangle right now? And stop comparing yourself to other people. This is something we're going to talk in much more detail about in just a minute. But I want to remind you that every time you compare yourself to somebody else in a social situation, you're going to find some kind of fault. Everybody's got different characteristics that they're better at than someone else, and vice versa, right? So stop comparing yourself to others. And that is what we're going to talk about next after I take one little drink real quick. And that is social comparison. So social comparison is something that is very near and dear to my heart, because when I was working on my doctoral dissertation, I did my research and study on looking at the effects that social media has on body image constructs among females. This Oh man, sorry guys, I keep going out. Oh man, I hope.
Jinxie, is that your internet or is that, are you on a phone?
Hopefully it will stay.
You're back now.
Darn. Okay. Am I back, Gabe?
You are back. You're like back for like one sentence and then you freeze again. The computer is giving me anxiety.
Let's implement our techniques.
Jinxie, are you on you're on a computer? Has anybody ever heard Jinxi talk before? Or awesome. How did you find out about the seminar? Awesome. Any idea how he found out? Sweet. Awesome. Can you tell him a marketing business guy? How does that make you feel? I guess is the, well, hopefully this starts soon. Otherwise, we could start the trust falls. Oh, she's moving her cursor. My guess is that she's restarting. Okay, we got you back. We're going to get your audio in a second here. Your audio is not in yet. Your audio is not coming through yet, Jinxi. Your audio, no audio. It looks like your audio is turned on, but nothing is coming through.
Can you hear me now?
Perfectly.
Okay. Oh man, you guys, I'm so sorry. Damn. I'm trying to use this. As you can see, my camera isn't as good now. I was trying to use this cool program for my camera, so I am so sorry. Okay, we're back. Are we good?
I believe we are all good. Yeah, just give me one more sec. Wait, one more second, just to see, make sure we're online. But,
okay.
We could give it a go anyways. But
thank you for your patience, and I really apologize.
well, you know what? We're all good enough. Why don't you carry on?
Yeah, are we good? Okay. Okay, cool. So social comparison. So yeah, I think I told you about my doctoral dissertation, and when I was working on looking at the effects that social media has on body image constructs for women, and the theoretical framework that I used for this study was called the social comparison theory. And this was brought to us in the 1950s by this psychologist named Dr. Leon Festinger. And basically what the social comparison theory says is that people base their self-worth on how they think they measure up to other people in their social sphere. Now, when we're using social comparison, we tend to use one of two types. We have upward social comparison and downward social comparison. So when we are using upward social comparison, we're basically comparing ourselves to other people that we kind of think are better at something than us or better than us in some way. And when we use that type of comparison, we usually tend to not feel as good about ourselves. When we use downward social comparison, we are comparing ourselves to other people who we think are worse off than us in some way, or that we're better at something than they are. And when we use downward social comparison, we oftentimes feel a little bit better about ourselves. So when I was doing my study, I used this wide range of research participants who were all self-identified as female. They were between the ages of 18 and 49, and they came from this wide array of cultural backgrounds. And they were all self-described as active, meaning that they worked out at least 3 times a week, and they all used social media. So what I did is I curated this huge array of imagery, all with specific hashtags. And I had each of the participants look at this imagery. And then after they looked through all of these photos, I asked them this variety of questions that were crafted to measure their various levels of body image satisfaction or dissatisfaction. And what my study found was that after viewing this imagery and asking them the questions, we saw very high increased levels of body image dissatisfaction and much more self-internalization of body ideal standards. So what people believe that they thought the ideal body should look like. And this was very fascinating and honestly a little unsettling with how well viewing imagery, how much that was of an impact that was having on people's feelings about themselves. And while I was writing up all of the details of the research, I postulated that one of the reasons that this occurs is this thing that I like to call the highlight reel trap. So what this means is, when we're posting on social media, all of us tend to, not always, but we tend to like to post our best, happiest, most proud moments, right? That's what we like to show and share with other people. And that's all awesome when we are the one posting. But something happens when we are the viewer of that imagery, and we kind of fall into this highlight reel trap where we're comparing our moments, or at least boring, mundane moments where we're sitting on the couch in our pajamas with everybody else's highlight reels, all the best, most proud moments of people's lives. And when we do that, we tend to use that upward social comparison. And as a result, we oftentimes don't feel quite as good about ourselves. Now, obviously, in your line of work, social media is incredibly important. I know that having that presence is such a helpful tool in showcasing your work and building your clientele. So the solution is not to use social media, but just becoming aware and cognizant of how some of these things play on us and make us feel can really be a big step in changing our behaviors. So
we want to really get to a point where we are not comparing ourselves to others as often. And I know that this sounds super cliche and so easy, but really I like to ask people to just remember that they are not you. Nobody else is going to be able to do those incredible, awesome things that you have done exactly in that same way and with your special flair. And some little tips to remember when we're on social media is pay attention to what triggers those comparisons for you. Are you on there at a certain type of day when you start feeling that way? Are you on certain people's pages when you start feeling that way a little bit more? And if you are, maybe it's time to make some adjustments with that. I also like to ask people to appreciate others. And I know that seems counterintuitive, but next time you feel bad about yourself or jealous of somebody else, maybe something that you're seeing, try to make this conscious effort of turning that self-judgment into this authentic appreciation for somebody else. We know, and we'll talk about in a little bit, the power of kindness and how that act of kindness can shift our mood toward this much more positive and benevolent state. And it's okay to unplug every once in a while. You know, sometimes just stepping away from your phone for a few days or even a few hours can really give you this whole different perspective once you get back on there. And last, I like to ask people to compare yourself with yourself. And what I mean by that is take your current self and compare it with things you've done in your past. Pull out some of those old tattoos you've done. Look at how far you've come and realize that that place that you're at right now, it's just this little tiny step of where you might be 5 or 10 years from now. So compare yourself with yourself. And that leads me to the next thing we're going to talk about, which is self-care. And going back to that idea of replenishing your well, self-care is so essential for this. When you work in the line of work that you do, you're always taking care of other people. You're always making sure that other people's needs and priorities are sometimes ahead of yourself. But where are you putting yourself in replenishing that well? So self-care is basically anything that we do to take care of our mental, our emotional, and our physical health. And obviously this looks different for everybody, right? Everybody finds different ways to build themselves up. So it could be things like walking, running, swimming, hiking, reading, drawing, yoga, exercise, gardening, cooking, baking, sewing, talking to a friend, getting a massage, having a nap, playing video games, listening to a podcast, whatever it is that helps you to fill up that well. And self-care can be proactive, where we like make a point of scheduling that self-care into our routine, or it can be.
Jinxi, real quick, did you change your mic situation?
Oh,
Your audio just got a little very bassy.
Oh no, I did it.
Well,
can you not hear me very good?
Well, if nothing changed, don't worry about it. But it seems like something happened.
Well, I had it when I had it hooked up before. It was hooked up to a nice microphone, but I switched to the component in my computer, so I am fearing that might be what's happening.
Yeah, it is. So just find a good spot and then stay in it. I think if you move forward or back,
Okay.
It's all good.
Okay, I do move a lot, so sorry. Okay, so self-care can be proactive when you actually make a point to schedule it into your routine, Or sometimes it can be reactive when you're like really having a rough day and you need to turn to self-care to replenish those good vibes and fill that well back up. Whoops, sorry. And just some little things to keep in mind. When you are practicing self-care, really learn how to slow down that world around you. We're going to talk about mindfulness in just a minute, but use that time to really pay attention to all the good stuff that you're doing to replenish your well. And schedule self-care into your calendar if you need to. Sometimes this might mean you tell yourself, like on Tuesday night, I'm going to come home and take a bubble bath. Or on Saturday mornings, I'm going to go on a hike. If you need to actually write it into your calendar, do that. Also, don't let self-care turn into just another stressor. And what I mean by that is, say you have decided that on Tuesday nights you're going to come home and take a bubble bath, but you get home and you're so tired that you can't even wash your face, let alone take a bath. Well, learning how to say no is also practicing self-care. And like I said a moment ago, really learning how to be present and be in that moment can make our self-care so much more impactful. And that's the thing that we are going to talk about next. And that's this idea of mindfulness. So basically, mindfulness is learning how to really be in that here and now, in that present moment, learning how to be aware of the things that we're feeling, the things that the actions that we're doing, the thoughts that we're having, right then in that moment, without judging ourselves, without criticizing ourselves. I don't think we have time to do the body scan today, but I will post a link to do this practice so that maybe you can implement it into your life if you'd like to. Basically, what a body scan does is we take a few minutes and we just close our eyes, work on breathing, and really start focusing on places where we're holding tension and holding stressors in our body. And when we get good at using the body scan, it can help us to focus our attention, learn how to let things be, and just help us to get unstuck. So I will be sure to post a link, and maybe Gabe can help me to get that to you if you'd like to learn how to do the body scan practice a little bit and incorporate that into your mindfulness techniques. So the next thing I'd like to talk about, which is in relation to mindfulness, is probably my favorite thing to share with people. And that is this idea of radical acceptance. So radical acceptance was brought to us by this psychologist named Dr. Marsha Linehan. And she herself, she created radical acceptance for this type of therapy known as DBT, or dialectical behavioral therapy, which is a part of CBT, like we talked about earlier, cognitive behavioral therapy. And Dr. Linehan herself suffered from borderline personality disorder. And she began working with a lot of patients who also suffered from BPD. And so part of DBT is incorporating distress tolerance tools into your toolbox so that you can turn to them when you feel overwhelmed and you need a way to ground. But I find that radical acceptance works so well for so many different types of therapy and just utilizing in our daily life that I really love to share it with people. So basically what radical acceptance is it's this idea that we just learn to accept life exactly as it comes to us, right then in that moment, whether it's good, whether it's bad, whether we wish that it was different or not. We're learning how to just accept life on its terms, right then as it is. It's about like saying yes to life exactly as it comes to us. So I created this little slide for you to kind of get the gist of what radical acceptance is. So say you wake up in the morning and you look outside and you're like, oh man, it's raining again. Great, I'm not going to be able to do all the things I want to do today. Why does it always have to be raining when I just want it to be sunny? Well, if you are practicing radical acceptance, you're going to look out the window and you're going to say, yep, it's raining. That's all there is to it. You have accepted life exactly as it came to you right then in that moment without wanting to change it for any reason. And the really awesome thing about radical acceptance is that so many of us spend so much time ruminating and thinking about all the hard and difficult things that have happened to us in our lives. And when we do this, every time we do that, we're really re-wounding ourselves. It's increasing our suffering. So there's something very powerful about using and learning how to incorporate radical acceptance so that we can just be cool with exactly where we are in that moment. We learn to say, I can't change what happened to me before. I can't control what's going to happen to me in the future like anxiety does. All I can do is be present right in this, here in this moment, and accept exactly where I am. And when we get better and better at learning how to incorporate radical acceptance into our lives, we've seen that it can really shift and strengthen levels of self-confidence in a big way. Now, obviously, we all know what self-confidence is, right? It's just this feeling of trust in our abilities, in our qualities, our judgment. It's this courage to know who we are and believe and act on those things that we think about ourselves. And we know that when we have higher levels of self-confidence, we are more productive in our work. We have lower levels of anxiety. We're obviously more willing to try more new things because we are feeling confident about what we can do. And we're more resilient when difficult things happen. And if we remember back to the very beginning, when we were talking about well-being, this is something that we look for with emotional well-being. How resilient are we when difficult things happen? How do we react to the stressors, to the anxiety that come up in our lives? And that leads me to the idea of motivation. Obviously, we all have different reasons for getting up every day. And sometimes it's easy to see fluctuations in our motivation levels. So today I'm going to talk about two different types of motivation. So we've got intrinsic motivation and extrinsic motivation. So intrinsic motivation is basically doing something just because it's personally rewarding to you. You are passionate about it. You love it. You just want to do it because it's something in you that just means something to you. I usually like to ask artists to think back to when they were kids and they first started discovering that art was their thing. You probably found yourself creating, coloring, drawing, painting all the time just because you loved it and it was like something in you that you knew was a part of you. That's what intrinsic motivation is. Extrinsic motivation is a little bit different. This is something that we do because of some type of reward that's going to come to us, or to avoid some type of punishment. So a reward could be just getting a paycheck. It could be avoiding a punishment in some way, like you're cleaning your house because you don't want your guests who are coming over to see that you're a messy person. You know, it's something where you are avoiding a punishment or gaining some type of a reward. It could be like winning a trophy, getting a paycheck, things like that. Another example is reading a book. Like if you're intrinsically motivated, you would be reading that book just because you love the story, you like that author, you want to know about those characters. But if you're reading a textbook to study for a test, this would be extrinsic motivation, where you're doing it to get a good grade on an exam. So the key with these two different types of motivation is that they really exist on this continuum. You're always going to be somewhere on that scale. But what we want to get good at doing is to recognize when we find ourselves too far on one side. So if you find that you're showing up to work every day just to do that tattoo because you need rent money or pay your mortgage, and you're too far on that extrinsic side, try to scale it back and tap into more of the intrinsic motivation. Try to remember what it was like when you were creating art just because you were so passionate about it and loved it so much. A good exercise might be to just create a piece of art only for you, not for a tattoo coming up, not for a painting that you're planning, just something that only you are going to see. And then if you want to take it a step farther, maybe do some art therapy in there and really examine that piece and ask yourself what it says, what it's saying about your life and what you're doing right now. Learn how to balance these levels of motivation so that you can find that happy medium where you are creating because you need the extrinsic rewards, but you're also doing it because of your love and your passion for what you're doing. And one of the ways that we can do that is through goal setting. So goals can be very helpful in life, really just to help us to have some kind of focus, some kind of direction. They're kind of like maps. They give us this point of reference to know if we're making progress in our life. And as the old adage goes, a goal without a plan is just a wish. And I like to show this image of goals being prepared to be written down here, because we know that when goals are actually translated from something just in our mind onto paper, or it could also be if we share them on social media, or speak them out loud to another person, and do we have accountability in some way, we are much more likely to accomplish those goals than just thinking them in our head. And this was shown in this study in 2015 by a psychologist named Gail Matthews. And she showed that when her participants actually wrote down their goals, they were 33% more successful in achieving them than people who just formulated those ideas in their head. And that is because this really cool thing called the endowment effect happens. And that's when we actually take ownership of something, like owning the goals that we're making. So I'm going to share with you a little example of how the endowment effect works. So there was this cool research study done at Cornell University, where researchers took the participants and broke them up into different groups. So one of the groups they took into a room, and they started them out by giving them a bar of chocolate. And then later they came into the room with a coffee mug, and they asked them, would you like to exchange the chocolate bar for a coffee mug? And surprisingly, 90% of them wanted to stick with the chocolate bar. Only 10% of them took the trade to the coffee mug. Another group of the participants, they started out with the coffee mug and told them they could keep it, came in later with a bar of chocolate and asked them, would you like to exchange the coffee mug for the chocolate? And again, almost identical statistics, 89% of them wanted to keep the coffee mug and only 11% wanted to switch it for the chocolate. And this was just this really beautiful example of the endowment effect in action, because it wasn't about those actual objects that they were given. It was about what they already had. They had taken ownership of these objects. And that is exactly what happens when you take ownership of the goals that you are putting out there into the world. So how can we become goal diggers? Well, there's obviously all types of goals, right? There's long-term things that we're working on. It might be monthly goals, weekly goals, daily goals. I am a big fan myself of micro goals. So every morning I like to write down just little things on a piece of paper of what I'd like to accomplish that day. And there's something so reinforcing every time you get to make a little cross through that list, right? And we know from research that working on micro goals, little daily things that we do every day, can be such a huge catalyst for helping us to work towards those long-term goals. It kind of goes back to the idea of those baby steps. We've got to be okay with making the tiny bits of progress if we ever want to get to those big long-term goals. A way that some people find successful to put these goals into action is the SMART goal system. So this was brought to us by George Duran in the 1980s. And SMART is an acronym for specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-bound. So basically, with specific goals, we want these things to be something that's clear, that's easy to understand. We don't want our goals to be too generalized or broad. So for instance, instead of saying, like, I want to get healthy as your goal, you would say, I want to get healthy by, instead of drinking 3 sodas a day, I will drink water, or I will drink only 1 soda a day. Or maybe a more specific goal would be, I'm going to get healthy by going to the gym 3 times a week. So we want them to be specific. Next, the measurable part. This is something that needs to be quantifiable in some way. So this would include dates, amounts, something that we can actually measure to make sure that we're getting closer to reaching the goal that we set. So this could be something like, I am going to learn 1 new method of painting this month, or I'm going to save $100 extra this week. Attainable goals. This needs to be something that is actually achievable. So we don't want something to be too easy, but we also don't want it to be so challenging that it's not attainable either. So if we reach one goal, we can make the next one more challenging, but we want to make them realistic, yet challenging enough that we actually feel empowered enough to work towards raising the bar the next time. With relevant goals, we want this to be something that actually applies and will benefit our life in some way. So say that you live in an area where your clients, a lot of your clients speak French or speak Spanish. So learning a new language would be a relevant goal to help your life, to help your work in some way. And time-bound goals are basically, for lack of a better word, timely. We want to have some kind of a deadline, a date, some way that we know that we are reaching the goal that we're setting. And I like to throw a little bit of celebration in there and have you add that when you reach that on that date, you will celebrate something in some way. So let's put the SMART goal system into play. Okay, so let's say that our goal is we want to get better at oil painting by creating 2 new oil paintings by the last day of February. We're going to do this by painting twice a week, so on Tuesday and Thursday nights after you get home. And we will celebrate when we finish these paintings by taking our partner out to dinner. Okay, so we've got all kinds of specifics going on, right? We know what we're going to do, how we're going to do it, when we're going to finish that goal. It's measurable because we know what date we want to do it by. We know that we're going to do it on Tuesday and Thursday nights. And we know that we're going to make 2 new paintings. Third, it's attainable because you're already a painter. You're already an artist. Maybe you're just not as skilled at oil painting yet. So it's a challenging yet realistic goal. It's relevant because you're already an artist. So helping you to learn this new medium is just going to make you more well-versed artist and better in other areas of your art as well. And it's time-bound because we know when our deadline is, we know what we want to accomplish, and we're going to commemorate that accomplishment by taking our partner out to dinner. So the thing to remember with goals is that it's really just this way to positively focus our energy in positive directions. You can be flexible with your goals. Your priorities can change. You can pop new ones in there when other ones aren't relevant. But it's just this beautiful way to help you to focus your energy. And on that note, our very last section we're going to talk about is positive psychology. This idea of behavioral science was brought to us in the 1990s by Dr. Martin Seligman, who at the time was also the president of the American Psychological Association. And he set out to approach this whole new way of examining psychological problems, because he knew that for the most part, the field of psychology tends to focus on problems and disorders. And obviously this is very important. This is something that I do in my work every day, and we always need to be working on ways to help people to alleviate issues that they're having. But he felt that there also needed to be a way to look at the ways that individuals were growing and prospering. So he decided to look at what was going right with people instead of what was going wrong. And that was the birth of positive psychology. And since those early days, there has been a wealth of research conducted in this branch of science. And it's led to all kinds of new insights and examining things like strengths, meaning and purpose, how to function optimally. I know sometimes with the title positive psychology that sometimes it conjures up ideas of like this Pollyanna-like focus, but it's super important to remember that this is a very heavily researched branch of the behavioral sciences. And the things that we will talk about next are all backed by decades of research and statistics. So first, I'd like you to remember back to the cognitive triangle and how important it is when we're utilizing strengths and that optimistic self-talk and positive self-talk, and how that path helps us get around the triangle. The first thing we're going to focus on is gratitude. This is something that has been researched greatly in positive psychology. We all know what gratitude is, right? It's just this appreciation for others. It's showing this sense of thankfulness to other people. And the great thing about gratitude is as soon as you start doing it, it's no longer about you. It's about giving thanks to this other person. We know that through research that practicing gratitude helps us to reduce stress levels. It increases levels of happiness. We're much more likely to feel positive emotions and have greater appreciation for the experiences that we're having. It helps us to build stronger relationships with other people because we're showing them that we appreciate them. And we know that it alters the molecular structure of our brain. And there was a study done in 2016 where these psychologists took 300 people who were already receiving mental health treatment for anxiety and depression. And what they did is they put these people into 3 different groups. So the first group, they asked them to write letters of gratitude to another person for 3 weeks straight. The second group, they also asked them to be writers, but they were asked to just write about their own personal feelings. And the third group was the control group, and they didn't do any type of writing. Well, what they did is after 4 weeks and again at 12 weeks, they re-examined and measured where these people were at with their treatment. And what they found is that the people who had written those letters of gratitude were showing significantly lower levels of anxiety and depression. They also noted it's super cool little thing to find is that those people were using more positive emotion words when they were in therapy and also using more we words as opposed to I or me words. So this finding just really highlights the benefits of writing out or sharing our feelings of gratitude with other people. It helps to release stress. It increases our positive emotions. It heightens our levels of happiness, and it really aids in our recovery. Sometimes it can be tricky to get that snowball rolling. But if we want to create this culture of gratitude, one thing that sometimes people find very helpful is even in your shop or in your place of business, create like this appreciation board where you share with other people how much you notice and appreciate the cool things that they're doing. Share the gratitude. Or maybe come in early one day and leave a little note on someone's station to tell them what you noticed or how awesome you think they are. It's these little acts of kindness and getting used to paying attention to the things that people do for you, even if it's as little as when someone holds the door open for you or they let you go ahead of them in line. Mentally keeping track of those random acts of kindness can also help you to perform those better as well. And kindness is this other area of research that is done in positive psychology, and this really powerful tool that can be so helpful to keep in our toolkit. And we know through research that kindness stimulates the production of serotonin, which helps to regulate our mood. It helps us to actually heal faster. It helps to calm us more quickly and increase levels of happiness. And we know that through studies that kindness has been shown to lower levels of blood pressure, while it increases self-esteem, lowers depression, lowers stress levels, produces greater happiness. So as we've talked about before, get used to really paying attention to those little random acts of kindness that other people do for you. I've always loved this quote from Harold Kushner that says, "Do things for people not because of who they are or what they do in return, but because of who you are. And that leads me to the very last little thing we're going to talk about. And that is the idea of focusing on your strengths. So I know that today we've talked about a lot of the little things that creep in to threaten our well-being and how we can fix those things. And we always want to always be working on fixing our shortcomings. But it's also very important to focus and notice and nourish the things that we're already really great at. So a strength is basically anything that helps you to feel more authentic and energized. It's those things that you know you're just innately so good at. It's your strong points, those good things that you just find are part of you. And we know from research that when companies let workers focus on their strengths instead of asking them to improve their deficiencies, we see really big spikes in productivity, greater profitability. People have higher levels of job satisfaction because they're doing the stuff that they already love to do, which makes you feel more empowered and gives you that sense of passion. There was a study done by the Corporate Leadership Council, and they worked with a whole bunch of big corporations like Lego, Caterpillar, Lowe's, Canon, Viacom, Maytag. They followed 19,000 employees from 27 different countries. And what they found is that when these corporations let their people focus on their strengths, instead of asking them to work on deficiencies, they saw a 36.4% increase in performance as compared to a 26.8% decrease in performance when they were asked to focus on their weaknesses. And this is a swing of almost 63%. So it shows you how beneficial it can be to really tap in on the things you're already so good at. So I would like to ask you to become a strength spotter. Name your strengths, nurture your strengths, develop this strengths mindset. And also a really cool thing to do can be try to catch people in moments of excellence, doing extraordinary things at ordinary times. So this might be like you're out to eat and your server is just super awesome, going the extra mile. Tell them that you notice it. Catch them doing something extraordinary in this totally mundane, ordinary time. Or if you have an awesome checker at a store or something like that, notice these moments, nurture them in other people, and they help your own strengths to grow as well. And we know that when we honor our strengths, this can lead to increased happiness levels. We can lower our stress, increase our confidence. And one of the things that research has shown is that it creates higher levels of creativity. When we are really able to start tapping into these things, practicing self-compassion, and it helps us to understand and accept ourselves instead of criticizing ourselves when we get frustrated or do something wrong. It can be such a powerful catalyst to changing that loop around the cognitive triangle and helping us to implement the positive self-talk that we know can help to alleviate so many of the issues that can come up in our lives. So I hope that some of these techniques and tips that we've talked about today can help you to approach those questions that we asked at the beginning in a little bit different way as you get better and better at strengthening them. I hope that it helps you to really feel like you are living your purpose, that you are proud of the work that you're doing, and that you really feel like you are living your life to the fullest. And that is all I've got for you today. And I'm so sorry I went late, and I'm so sorry my stuff quit working, that I used that very precious time. But
It's okay. We thank you very much. That was awesome. And you fought right through it. The computers are not trivial to fight through. So thank
well,
you very much.
thank you. I am so sorry. I wish I could get back those minutes, but thank you all so much. I don't know if we have any time for questions, but
We do. If anybody here live has any questions, then you can get them ready. I'm going to bring them. I'll bring the microphone over and put everybody on the spot, so you should feel embarrassed if you don't ask. No, that's entirely good. But in the meantime, I'm going to read off. There's a bunch of people online. Rob says, "Yay!" Exclamation point! Exclamation point!
oh, thank you.
Neil Foster says, "Good morning. I suffer from severe anxiety, especially social anxiety, and I was just put on ADHD meds, which I think makes it worse. So I don't know how if you've covered that at all. But let's see.
ADHD can work in different ways. Some medications work differently for people who have ADHD than like a neurotypical brain."
Right. Could you, if you want to stop screen sharing, then you can actually get a view of the audience
Yes.
here. Okay, so let's see. So Steve says, "So much great info, Jinxi, you rock."
Oh, thank you.
KY says, "Thank you so much for taking the time to explain such valuable information to us."
Oh, thank you so much, you guys. I appreciate it so much.
Oh, they're still coming. See, Diablery says, "Jinxi is so amazing and inspiring. I can't wait to hear more from her." Melissa
thank you.
Fusco from Colorado says, "Good, great." We got a bunch of people saying that we're back online. Let's see. Tiny Mechanic says she is amazing. Her explanation of imposter syndrome really hit home.
Oh, good. Yay.
Let's see. And then some people are asking questions about asking questions in the chat room. You could just ask your questions in the chat room. Autistic Mama leaves 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 hearts. Steve says, "You're amazing. I love this presentation. So much great info." April, "You did an amazing job." Okay. Wisdom on the Facebook land. He's very complimentary. But I'm going to see if does anybody have any questions or comments that is not scared of the microphone. Okay, you sure? Last chance. Okay, awesome. Everyone's embarrassed, but
oh, that's okay. Hey.
Or you did an amazing job of explaining.
Oh, well, thank you so much for having me. And if you do have questions that you'd like to have answered in private, or if you think of something later, anyone can email me at jinxi@drjinxi.com. And I have so many other things that I'm hoping to get into some kind of a podcast or YouTube channel. There's so much more to all these things. I feel like I need more time to explain. So if you have any thoughts of things that you would like me to cover or talk about, I would love to hear them, because I feel like this stuff, once we start spreading it and sharing it with each other, it's so contagious, and it can be so helpful to just remember that we're not alone. All of us have these things, right? I mean, it's life. Yes, I see a hand.
Oh, okay, hold on 1 second. Let me get you the microphone, because otherwise, and also I set it up so that there's no feedback. No feedback.
Jinxi, do you have like any kind of social media that we can follow you on?
Oh, thank you for asking. You're so sweet. Yes. On Instagram, I'm just at Jinxi, Jinxi. And there are links on there for my link tree that go to like my Psychology Today page and my Black Sheep Therapy, and then also my other businesses with Out of Step Books and tattoo shop and all that stuff. But please, I would love to connect and keep in touch. I appreciate you so much. So please find me there.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, okay, so maybe we should clap it out and show Jinxi our appreciation.
Thank you guys for coming so much. Thank you to everyone. And let me know if you think of anything that we can talk about or I can answer. Okay?
And we'd love to book you a good full hour. We had a nice little teaser on the previous podcast last week, but maybe we could get you for an hour someday.
Right
Wednesday.
on. Let's
Awesome.
plan it.
Awesome. Hey, thanks again. I'm going to click the button.